My name is Talhar Latif and I'm with the development team here at FanClouds. In this demo, we're going to take a look at business continuity disaster recovery as a service. We have deployed an application on IKS Kubernetes cluster, and we are going to take a backup of that application and then create a disaster and then restore it. So let's take a look at the workloads of this application. These are the pods. It is a WordPress application with its data sitting in persistent volumes, and this is the load balancer IP through which the front end is exposed. So let's visit the application. We are going to populate the persistent volumes by creating a post. So let's do that. Let's add some sample post, publish it so the data is saved. Then let's view the post. So this is the post. Let's add some more data by posting a comment. After we are done with this, we'll move on to VPC Plus app, and there we would create a backup. So you need to add your cloud account information, and after you're done with that, you need to switch to the disaster recovery tab and perform a discovery on your IBM cloud account. So our cluster resides in Sydney region. We're going to perform discovery on Sydney region. So let's select Sydney and hit discover. So it is a live call to IBM Cloud and all the VPCs, IKS clusters, all of the networking resources, and any data sitting on that cluster is going to be discovered and will be provided with the VPC list. So from here we need to select a VPC in which our cluster resides, and we'll be able to see the cluster on right hand side. Click on the cluster to view its details. These are the workloads on that cluster, and our app is in demo app namespace. So let's select that and create a backup. Let's give it a name and initiate the backup. So NS3 bucket is going to be created on user account, and the data is going to be backed up there. You can also view the worker pools here of that cluster. So let's wait for the backup. Okay, so our backup is been created successfully. Let's move on to cluster backup section. Here you'll be able to see all of your cluster backups. Click on it to expand it. This is the backup, and you also see the worker pools here, and these are the namespace. So you can select a namespace and create a backup right from here. Now let's move on to our terminal. Let's look at the pods again to see if it's in running state. Now let's delete the namespace to create a disaster scenario. It would delete the workloads and the PVC's data in demo app namespace. So we no longer be able to access the application. Now let's move back to the cluster backups and hit restore. VPC Plus provides you three different options. The new VPC option is the one where we will restore the VPC snapshot, and then we will provision the IKS cluster and restore the data onto that IKS cluster. A user just needs to provide cluster name, select region, zone, and resource group, and hit restore. In existing VPC, a user needs to provide the cluster name and select a VPC and subnet. In this scenario, VPC is already created, so the snapshot of the cluster is going to be restored in this new VPC. The third use case that we have is for existing Kubernetes cluster. So if you want to restore it onto an existing cluster, we will select this option, and this is used for application mobility. So let's restore it onto the same cluster. So on the right hand side, you can see the provisioning report. Right now the cluster is being prepped for restoration, and then the data and workloads would be restored onto this cluster, and then we will take a look at the workloads from the terminal and then visit the applications front end as well. So our provisioning is successful. Let's go back to the terminal. Let's uh, describe the pods to see if they are in running condition. Let's take a look at the uh, persistent volume claims to see if the data has been restored. So we can see the PVCs. Let's also take a look at the um, services to grab the external IP, load balancer IP. So this is the application that we restored. As you can see from the timestamp of the comment also, this is the data that was backed up by VPC Plus disaster recovery as a service. So we have successfully restored it. Now let's explore some more option. um, Apart from on-demand backups, we can also create scheduled policies. So let's click on scheduled backup to create scheduled policy. Let's give it a name. We're going to keep it weekly. Then we need to select the namespace, that is demo app, the frequency, we want it weekly backup, and the time to live for a backup, after which it's going to be deleted. And then hit scheduled backup. So now a scheduled policy would run and take a backup each week this time. You can view that from the backup policies that it's successfully created. And you can also view the frequency timing. You can edit this scheduled policy as well. You can delete it and restore it as well. Moving on to EKS cluster backups. So you need to select the cloud account, region, and then hit discover. To take a backup, simply click on that cluster. You can see the workloads and node groups. Select the namespace for which you want to create backup. Let's create a scheduled policy. Give it a name. Give it some description. Then we will select the frequency and the backup counts that we want to maintain and hit create backup. We can view these backups from cluster backups. This is the backup that we just created. Let's take a look at the VPC snapshotting feature for AWS. Um, Similar selection for VPC discovery. Just select the region and hit discover. And then if you want to view the details of any VPC, simply click on it to expand it, and you can view the details of networking resources. To create a backup, click on create backup and give it a name. And then initiate the snapshot. So we have taken a snapshot of one of the VPCs, and we can restore it anytime we want. Now let's move on to Edge or on-prem. For Edge or on-prem, we have three different ways in which you can install KAgent: as a binary, as a Docker Compose manifest file, and as a Kubernetes manifest file for VPC Plus to communicate with the cluster. This is the agent that we have already deployed. Now let's move on to discover a cluster. We need to provide a name for the cluster since on-prem clusters don't have any name. Then we'll select the kubeconfig file and select the agent through which we will communicate and hit discover. In this discovery, we are going to discover the workloads of that cluster and the configurations of that cluster. So discovery is complete. Let's click on the cluster to expand its workloads. Then we are going to select a namespace to create backup, and then we are going to initiate the backup. We need to select our cloud account, select the cloud, select the region in which we want to create the backup, and give the backup a name, and then hit confirm and backup. Let's wait for the backup to get completed. So our backup has been created successfully. Let's move on to the cluster backups. Here you can view all of the cluster backups that you have. To restore a backup, simply click on a backup, hit restore, and we have two different options here. One is existing VPC and another one is existing clusters. So you need to select the information, that is select the cloud account and the Kubernetes cluster. We also have a way in which you can restore the backups on the on-prem clusters themselves. So you can also select in this case a Kubernetes cluster from IBM and restore it. Moving back, let's now move on to the GCP clusters. In similar fashion, just select your cloud account, cloud project, and discover the clusters. And to take a backup, simply select the namespace and create backup by providing a name and a description and the region in which you want to keep the backup. This region is required to create a bucket onto which we will keep all of the backups taken by this cluster, and we need to select a service account and initiate the backup. We can view this backup in the cluster backup section. So this is the backup that we have taken. Similarly, if you want to snapshot VPC, just select cloud account, cloud project, and hit discover. And then if you want to view what resources are in this particular VPC, you can expand that. And to take a backup, simply click on create backup and give it a name, some description, and then you can either go with a single snapshot or a scheduled backup policy and initiate your backup. So in this case, we are going to go with weekly, daily, and we'll keep the backup count as 2. So a backup has been taken for this particular VPC. We can view that from here. This is the backup that we just initiated. You can also restore it by simply clicking on restore, selecting the cloud account, cloud project, and hitting restore. Thank you for watching this video.